Good evening. My name is Clare Zach, and I want to acknowledge that we're on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. My talk is about our collective migration story, and I'm going to start by sharing a story with you. The year is 1937, when a 14-year-old boy named Frank leaves a harsh and impoverished life in Czechoslovakia and emigrates to Canada with his mother, brother, and sister. Decades later, Frank repeats many stories about this epic-like voyage, and in minute detail to his children and his grandkids. The 2-day trek to France, 10 days by boat to Montreal, another 4 days by train to BC, and predictably, he boasts that he defied the odds and was the only one on that ship that didn't get seasick. But he also admits hardships of adjusting to life in Canada, of being unable to speak English, giving up his education, loneliness, discrimination, and how all of this eventually takes a toll on his mental health. 50 years after Frank's arrival, a young woman steps up to her booth at the Vancouver International Airport. An immigration officer, she welcomes newcomers to Canada, immigrants, refugees, and those seeking asylum. She witnesses families reuniting, but is most moved by stories from those having no choice but to flee their birthplaces because of war, poverty, or persecution. Later, she helps newcomers to learn English, adapt to life in Canada, and while encouraging local residents to welcome new arrivals. Well, as you may have guessed, Frank was my dad, the young woman was me, and the little girl in this picture was me many, many years ago. So migration has played a huge part in my life and the vocation that I've chosen. But I also believe that migration is a collective story that's really common to all of us. Intense migration of people is happening all around us, and it takes a few different forms. But the vast majority of Canadians now live in urban areas, and most Aboriginal people now live off reserve. Yet 100 years ago, cities were home to less than 10% of us. This migration is rapid, and it's about unprecedented change. It's no wonder that the word migration is rooted in Greek, meaning to change. While change, and particular change as a result of migration, is challenging, I believe that it also presents opportunity for both transformation and reconciliation. Canada is often referred to as a country of immigrants. But the connection between immigration and the colonization of Aboriginal people and the residential school experience is not talked about because it's an uncomfortable topic. But silence only serves to maintain silos that breed ignorance, mistrust, and discrimination, whereas the act of honest conversation allows us to learn, allows us to see and imagine things differently. For me, learning was inspired by something called the Vancouver Dialogues Project. In 2010, while Vancouver welcomed the world to the Olympics, I was privileged to work with Aboriginal, immigrant, and refugee leaders, along with Baldwin Wong, our project leader, to bring these solitudes together. It turned out that a crucial ingredient in making this successful was not about innovation. It wasn't about rocket science either. It was a practice as old as humanity itself, that of sharing personal stories. Storytelling is our oldest form of education. They say that it's essential to all humans. It's also been said that the harder the situation, the more important that storytelling actually becomes. Dialogue sessions brought together hundreds of us across Vancouver in longhouses, mosques, synagogues, and cultural centers. These sessions with no-holds-barred conversation demonstrated how dialogue transforms us. It uncovers truth, challenges stereotypes, shows how we're similar, deepens understanding. For example, we learned that the local First Nations were historically our first welcomers, and yet participants felt that Aboriginal people are in fact made to feel less welcome in Vancouver than immigrants are. We also learned that Aboriginal people may be more open to living among people from different cultures. Most urban Aboriginal participants believe that there is room for a variety of languages and cultures in Vancouver, but just over half of non-Aboriginal participants felt this way. Aboriginal people transitioning off reserves to cities face the same challenges as immigrant newcomers do when they arrive in Vancouver. Racism, loss of tradition and languages, barriers to employment and housing, isolation, and a lack of personal voice in political decision-making. Like immigrants, urban Aboriginal people call Vancouver home, but stay connected to their First Nations lands, which is really integral to strong family and social ties. Finally, Aboriginal people have the same aspirations for themselves as their children as we all do. As it was for my father for me, and as it is for me for my children, education is a top priority and an enduring aspiration for the next generation. The Vancouver Dialogues Project was transformative for many people and for the City of Vancouver. Afterwards, Vancouver became the first city of reconciliation in Canada, and in 2015 committed to implement 27 Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations. The City of Vancouver recognizes that reconciliation contributes to the health and wellness of all of our residents and is committed to creating opportunities for people from all backgrounds to have a voice in civic life. So I began this talk with my migration story. And these stories are the foundation of memories and histories of peoples who have taken different journeys to create a home in our cities. Together, we can find a way to talk together and walk together to fulfill our obligations to Aboriginal people at home, as well as our international commitments to welcome refugees. We are the storytellers of the present. Stories can inspire us to achieve a vision of a multicultural Canada that connects all of us to the realities of First Nation, urban Aboriginal, and immigrant communities. They build strong relationships needed to create an enduring, sustainable future for everyone. Rather than separate us, migration is actually our common story. In the words of Chief Robert Joseph, let us find a way to belong to this time and place together. Our future and the well-being of all our children rests with the kind of relationships we build today. Then for our children and grandchildren, all of us will have a much better story to tell together. Thank you.